I think trying to live was the only thing I could think about. Being in that type of environment and hearing those sounds and hearing, it was just so, you can't describe it.
I didn't think that I would need an assault rifle or a bigger handgun, but after seeing that yesterday, all things are possible.
Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul.
Right now, we are a nation in mourning after deadly mass shootings in Texas and Ohio. This is a live look in El Paso, where a memorial for victims of Saturday's shooting is growing this afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at 5. I'm Rob Hanrahan.
And I'm Jasmine Brooks. These are stories that continue to develop tonight. Here's the latest information about both shootings. The death toll has climbed to 31 after 2 people died today in El Paso. Officials say 48 people are still fighting for their lives. Authorities in Texas and Ohio say the suspects are both white men, but the motives are still unknown. The FBI is ordering new threat assessments at every field office. Now, over the next hour and a half, we're going to have live team coverage for you with the latest from Texas and Ohio.
And we'll also be breaking down how officials in the nation's capital are reacting and what gun control laws are in place already here in the state of Pennsylvania. On to El Paso now. People are placing white crosses outside the Walmart where the shooting happened, one for each of the victims. Authorities say they've identified all victims but are still not releasing all of their names until they can notify the families.
Through 6 degrees, maybe 3 degrees of separation, everybody knew someone who died here.
We are devastated by the events of El Paso and pray for the victims of this tragedy.
Through a spokesperson, the family of the alleged shooter talked today. Officials say Patrick Crucius drove about 10 hours to carry out his attack. They say he also posted a racist anti-immigration manifesto just before the rampage. In the city of Dayton, 9 people were killed, 27 others are injured. Natalie Brand is there with more on the victims and the investigation into exactly what happened.
Caitlin Mouget returned to the scene of Saturday's mass shooting in Dayton for the first time. She's grateful she escaped with her life.
That's the most difficult thing with any shooting, is why. And I don't believe we'll ever have a definitive answer, and that's something that we're all going to have to live with.
Mouget was nearby when police say 24-year-old Connor Betts opened fire, killing 9 people.
Hearing a weapon fired like that in succession like that, and you don't know where it's coming from, like literally running for your life, was exactly what we did.
The gunman's sister, 22-year-old Megan Betts, is among the dead. Police believe the siblings had actually traveled to Dayton together, along with a man described as her companion who was wounded but survived.
It seems to just defy believability he would shoot his own sister. But it's also hard to believe that he didn't recognize that was his sister.
Police are looking through all evidence here at the scene and reports that Betts had been suspended in high school after officials learned he compiled a hit list of individuals he wanted to kill. On Monday, a neighbor alluded to the gunman's troubled past.
I personally don't like to think anyone's capable of something that bad, but there was some instances of threats.
Police say the AR-15 style rifle Betts used was legal, but it was modified to function like an assault rifle. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Dayton, Ohio.
And we are learning a man from Western PA was among those killed in the Dayton, Ohio shooting as well. Nicholas Kumer graduated from a Washington County high school in 2012. He was in Dayton for a summer internship while working on his master's degree. Those who knew him say he was involved in just about everything. A memorial service for him is set for Thursday. Governor Tom Wolf ordering state flags to fly at half-staff to honor the victims in El Paso and Dayton. This affects all Commonwealth facilities, public buildings, and state grounds. It will remain at half-staff until sunset on Thursday.
These barbaric slaughters are an assault upon our communities, an attack upon our nation, and a crime against all of humanity.
President Trump addressing the deadly mass shootings today, and 2 senators say he appears ready to work on expanding background checks. Sinclair investigative correspondent James Rosen continues our team coverage from the White House with more.
Hate has no place in America.
Responding to the mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton, President Trump condemned racism and white supremacy and committed U.S. law enforcement to curbing the threats they pose.
We have asked the FBI to identify all further resources they need to investigate and disrupt hate crimes and domestic terrorism, whatever they need.
In earlier tweets, the president had called for bipartisan action to strengthen gun background checks, then proposed marrying such measures to new immigration laws.
That's a joke. That's an absolute freaking joke. That he's going to tie this to the most polarizing issue happening in the United States today around immigration reform.
The president also offered one proposal that could draw opposition from champions of Second Amendment rights.
We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
The National Rifle Association did not immediately respond to a request for comment on that proposal. Here at the White House, officials must determine how best to follow up on the president's statement using executive authority or working through the Congress. And they will reach these decisions not only in an election year, but in an environment in which many Democrats and some in the media are seeking to pin some measure of blame for the attacks on the president himself. At the White House, James Rosen.
President Trump was supposed to be in Western PA this week, but he's canceling the stop because of the shootings. He was supposed to be touring a petrochemical complex in Beaver County. The White House has not said when he will make that trip.
And tonight we are taking a closer look at Pennsylvania's gun laws and how they compare to our neighboring states. CBS 21's Brian Sheehan joins us now live outside the Capitol to explain. Brian.
Well, Jasmine, lawmakers don't return here to the state capitol for several more weeks, but that didn't stop many of them taking to social media this weekend to discuss reforming our nation's gun laws after those two mass shootings. Now, much of the talks have been focused on the red flag laws, which allow judges to take away individuals' guns if they believe that person is a threat to public safety. Now, earlier today, we spoke to attorney and firearms expert Mark Scaringi. He says our neighboring states, Maryland, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey all currently have them in place. Now, it was introduced here in Pennsylvania but didn't make it out of the General Assembly. Scaringi says it's also easier to process and transfer firearms here in PA than our neighboring states. And he believes the fact that PA has a state constitution that predates both the U.S. Constitution and Second Amendment is the reason why.
We have had strong protections on your right to keep and bear arms in Pennsylvania even before the United States of America came about. So that's one of the reasons that Pennsylvania is probably more conservative, might be a way to explain it, with regard to firearms rights.
Now, when it comes to red flag laws, our neighboring state, Ohio, also doesn't have one on the books. Of course, Dayton was the scene of the second mass shooting early Sunday morning. Now, Scaringi believes that red flag laws could pose an issue here in Pennsylvania. I'll explain why he believes that coming up at 6 o'clock. We're live out front of the Capitol tonight. I'm Brian Sheehan, CBS 21 News.
All right, Brian, in the wake of these mass shootings, more lawmakers say even stronger gun measures need to be put in place. Democrats are calling for bans on assault rifles and the expansion of criminal background checks. Earlier this year, the House passed legislation that would require background checks on all gun sales and most gun transfers. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked that bill from coming up for a vote.
Mitch McConnell needs to get off his get the Senate back in session and start passing some of these bills that we're sending over to him.
President Trump hinted on Twitter that he may support new background checks, but he did not bring that up in his address earlier today. You can find out more stories of survival and hear how more local lawmakers are responding to these deadly mass shootings at CBS21.com.
All right, let's switch gears now. Talk about CBS 21 News first warning weather, where it's been a spectacular day. There's been one little exception. Let me show you where. We have to take you into portions of Adams County, northwest Adams County. We had this little shower that popped up just to the northwest of Biglerville. It's actually dying down now, but watch this. About 3 o'clock. Yep, there it is. So that's all Mother Nature could muster, because the rest of it is warm and dry and just beautiful. We know we've had lower humidity today, so that's why it's been a little more comfortable. That changes as we head into tomorrow. That heat and humidity build back in. So mostly clear, 74 at 9 o'clock tonight. Late tonight, mostly clear, 70 degrees. And by tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., 68. So it looks like that better chance for rain stays with us as we go through the middle part of the week. We'll show you that with the 7-day in just a few minutes. Jasmine, back over to you.
Tom, thank you. This just in. It is one of the worst days for the stock market all year, which is bad news for your 401k, by the way. The Dow closing down more than 730 points. At one point, it was down more than 900. This after China devalued its currency, sparking a worldwide sell-off. Sellers say they're worried about the U.S. responding with more tariffs, which they say could weaken the global economy. Coming up, the question many of you are likely having tonight is, how do I talk to my kids about these tragedies? Well, next, we're joined by a mental health expert with the best ways to do that.
Plus, police investigating weekend shootings in Harrisburg. What you need to know as officers look for the people responsible.
Welcome back. We are joined by Dr. Melissa Brown with UPMC Pinnacle Psychological Associates. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
There's a lot to unpack as far as what we do with our own kids. I have a 6-year-old son, and I know he's aware of what's happened, but doesn't want to talk about it. And so how do I cover this ground with him? Because of the business I'm in, I'm going to know a lot about this, and he's going to hear a lot of it around
Absolutely. So one of the biggest mistakes parents make is they tell their kids what they're thinking or feeling. So it's important to ask those open-ended questions. What do they know happened? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they hearing? What are their kids talking about in their classes or on the bus or on the playground? So those are just great questions to start with.
I posted on Facebook, parents, what are you going to do? How do you handle it? And some said, I don't want to overwhelm my kids. So they want to know how much information to really give their children. And I'm sure it depends on their age as well.
It does. You really want to know where your kiddo is functioning developmentally and using those words that are appropriate. And no, don't tell them every detail of the events happening. And you know your child best, so gauge it where he or she is functioning. And
well, that's where I ran into the problem over the weekend, was that I kept saying, what are you hearing? What are you understanding out of this? And the more I kept asking those questions, the more he didn't want to talk.
Yeah.
And basically kind of left me with, well, you seem like you're okay, and that's not the right thing to do. You leave them as you seem like you're okay. You got to make sure.
Right, and then just keep checking in and say, Dad is struggling with this too. This is a hard thing. This was a horrific event that happened in our country, and bad things happen sometimes. And just try to provide that. What can you do in times of events like this, and how can you provide some structure and security?
Now, school is starting up in just a few weeks, so they're going to be going back. There's going to be active shooter drills. Some kids are just in kindergarten walking into this. So how do we kind of prepare them for back to school?
And I think talking to them about it and just saying these are some things that you might encounter and you might experience this, and let mom or dad know or a teacher know if you're scared or you're worried, and keep an eye on how your kiddo is functioning and if you notice any changes in behavior.
Really quick, I just want to say we were talking and Doctor, you said just don't avoid the topic.
Don't avoid it. No, as uncomfortable as for you as a parent, don't avoid.
Dr. Melissa Brown with UPMC Pinnacle Psychological Associates. Thanks for stopping. Stay around.
All right,
we have
we'll
more
do.
questions and we'll cover as we continue with our 90 minutes of coverage of these horrific events that have happened in Ohio and Texas. Moving on, golfing to help veterans and their families.
We're going to show you how one event is raising money to help those who have loved ones in the hospital.
All right, now it's practice.
And after a brief break from that humidity, here comes the heat, the humidity, and some storms. It's all in your First Warning forecast. Straight ahead.